Good evening. Welcome to APTN National News. I'm Melissa Ridgen. Residents of First Nations affected by long-term boil water advisories can now apply for compensation. It's part of a multi-billion-dollar settlement reached with the federal government back in December. Here's Lindsay Richardson with what you need to know about qualifying.
There is a drinking water settlement for First Nations, and the claims process is now open.
This might sound like an infomercial, but if you lived on one of the 258 First Nations communities in Canada touched by a long-term water advisory since 1995, you may now be entitled to compensation.
It's big. It's historic.
Last December, the federal government reached an $8 billion settlement in a class action suit. At least $1.85 billion is set aside for individual compensation. Another $6 billion is earmarked for improvements to infrastructure. For lawyers on the case, the settlement newly recognizes First Nations rights as well as federal responsibility.
I mean, it's a pretty hard one to sort of say I don't really have any responsibility for, you know. Human rights issues and sickness issues and, you know, watching videos with children with sores on them from being washed in the water that comes out of people's taps. I mean, that's pretty gruesome stuff, but it's real.
And just ask those leading the class action, like Curve Lake First Nation in Ontario.
Water is such a critical part of our cultural beliefs. That's the lifeblood of Mother Earth. That's what that's our responsibility to take care of as Indigenous people, as Anishinaabe.
Chief Weetung says Curve Lake still isn't as bad off as other communities, but lack of water affects everyday life.
The impact of not being able to wash your clothes because, they come out completely ruined. The additional financial burden of having water that destroys your appliances on a regular basis and significantly faster than in, non-Indigenous communities, of sitting beside your child in the bath every night until they're 3 or 4 and understand that they can't put the water in their mouths.
Individual compensation amounts will vary based on the type, duration, and harms. You're eligible to apply if you lived on a First Nation with a water advisory lasting more than a year, if that advisory took place between November 1995 and June 2021, or if you've experienced long-term health effects as a result of a water advisory. Claim forms can be filled out online at www.firstnationsdrinkingwater.ca. Although the individual compensation is good news, all eyes are on long-term solutions put in place by the feds.
Canada's ultimately got to come to the decision of whether or not they constantly want to do this, or do they want to set up structures where this actually gets done and resolved, because they almost all end up in some kind of a settlement agreement.
People making individual claims have until March 2023 to file. Lindsay Richardson, APTN National News, Montreal.
Some Mi'kmaq community members walked through the streets of Dartmouth, Nova Scotia on Tuesday to raise awareness for missing and murdered Indigenous women. They say that women in Atlantic region are often forgotten, but as Angel Moore reports, a New Brunswick program may offer a helping hand to some families.
We're never going to give up searching for you till we find you, Joyce.
That's Valerie Morris from Eskazoni Mi'kmaq Nation. She's pleading for the safe return of her daughter. Marley Alicia Morris, 24 years old, was last seen February 18th in Dartmouth, Nova Scotia. Fed up with the lack of action to find missing Indigenous women, Bridget Stevens organized this walk.
I wish that things would be more serious. I wish that we wouldn't be in the backside. And there's a reason why we are the highest rank of missing and murdered, because of how slow the police and everybody is for us to be told that we were missing.
About 50 Mi'kmaq community members showed up and handed out posters of missing women from Atlantic Canada. One of them is of Erin Maureen Brooks, 38 years old, from St. Mary's Wolastoqey Nation in New Brunswick. Brooks was last seen on December 27th at a St. Mary's smoke shop. Brooks' sister, Amy Paul, wants closure.
You don't know what it's like you see these other missing women and think, oh my goodness, I don't know what I'd do if that were my family member. And then all of a sudden it is. And it's heartbreaking.
In New Brunswick, there is a helpline available for families and friends of the missing or murdered. It offers information on the justice system, policing, and media, and where to access services such as mental health support. It was launched in 2019 by the New Brunswick Aboriginal Peoples Council. Michelle Purley, manager of the helpline, says the service is badly needed.
Because if one person calls the helpline and you can provide one person with information, supports, and guidance during this time, then yes, that's a success.
Paul was not aware of the helpline, but says St. Mary's First Nation has been supportive.
They've had some sacred fires and offered counseling for the family, and anything we've needed, they've helped with. But they have been totally amazing.
The helpline operates 24 hours a day. The number is 1-833-664-3463. The plan is to expand it to other provinces. In the meantime, the search for missing Indigenous women continues. Morris's father, Fabian Francis, will never give up.
And we're going to look under every rock in Canada, everywhere. We're going to knock on every door. We're not going to stop looking for you.
Angel Moore, APTN National News, Jabotuk, also known as Halifax.
Women's taxi safety is a growing issue in many parts of Canada, including the Yukon. According to a recent report, Indigenous women are at an even greater risk than their non-Indigenous counterparts in Whitehorse. As Sarah Connors tells us, demonstrators at a recent taxi safety rally are calling on Whitehorse City Council to protect all women from experiencing harassment when taking a cab.
Around 24 people gathered outside Whitehorse City Hall on Tuesday, demanding safer taxis for women, especially Indigenous women. The rally is part of a new taxi safety campaign by the Yukon Aboriginal Women's Council. According to a recent survey by the Yukon Women's Coalition, 62% of respondents reported incidents related to harassment, sexualized harassment, and assault when taking a taxi. And Indigenous women are 3 times more likely to report harassment when taking a taxi in Whitehorse compared to non-Indigenous women. Women's taxi safety has been an ongoing issue in other places like Winnipeg.
It's unfortunate that we have to rally for this in general.
Rally organizer Misha Witkoff is a taxi safety coordinator with the Women's Council. She says the findings in the report are concerning.
The fact that there's no viable safe solutions for them to get a safe ride home is defeats the very purpose of having a safe taxi ride.
Witkoff says bylaw has approached her about driver permit renewal. She's hopeful it will also accept the report's recommendations, which include increased enforcement and panic buttons.
I'm hopeful because of the conversations that I've been having throughout this campaign.
It's difficult to continue to see that type of statistic coming forward about women and about Indigenous women. And
Michelle Friesen is a Whitehorse City councillor whose family is from the Tonquachin Council. She says it's difficult seeing Indigenous women like herself disproportionately impacted by gender-based violence.
Any part that I can play in hoping to end that gender-based violence, I'm happy to come out and do that.
Friesen says City Council recently met with Bylaw and RCMP where they discussed safety recommendations from the report. More meetings about the issue are expected to take place. Sarah Connors, APTN National News, Whitehorse.
We need to take a quick break, but still ahead. Chiefs and the largest school division in Manitoba sign a deal they say will better serve Indigenous students.
Students need to be given every possible opportunity and chance to do well. And they have to feel safe, and they have to feel welcome, and they have to feel that that's a place for them.
It's one of the worst imaginable scenes since the war in Ukraine began. Today, Russian rockets struck a children's hospital in Mariupol. A camera from the Associated Press was nearby at the moment that the building was struck. The scene scene is utter devastation. The hospital was full of young patients at the time. Those who survived the blast walked around dazed and looking for loved ones. The injured were carried off to nearby ambulances. President Volodymyr Zelensky reacting to the carnage online, writing, "How much longer will the world be an accomplice to ignoring terror? Close the sky right now." Well, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau met with German Chancellor Olaf Scholz today to discuss Russia's invasion of Ukraine. This is the first in-person meeting for the two leaders since Scholz replaced longtime German Chancellor Angela Merkel back in December. Trudeau says Canada is sending another $50 million in specialized equipment to help Ukraine defend itself.
Last month, Chancellor Scholz made a historic announcement to shift German policy to meet the challenges of today, including by supporting Ukraine with lethal aid and military equipment. While Canada and Germany have stepped up to help defend Ukraine, so has all of Europe. Under the leadership of President von der Leyen, a proud European and a proud German, the European Union is mobilized to defend democracy. And in this, Germany and the European Union can count on the full support of Canada.
The situation in Ukraine is hitting an Edmonton powwow dance troupe maybe a bit differently than other people. Running Thunder dancers collaborated with Shumka Ukrainian dancers a couple of years ago on a dance production called Ancestors and Elders that explored the relationship between First Nations and the first Ukrainian settlers who arrived in Canada. Adrian Lachance was in that production. He said that watching what's happening to the homeland of Friends really hits close to home.
I just feel for the people, you know, because of TikTok, we're getting information and stories about their president and what a true warrior he is to stand up and to get into his gear, I guess you would say, to defend his country and his land, which is so inspiring for me to see as someone that you know, wasn't really given that opportunity, and to watch him do that, I think is so courageous on his part, and I definitely feel for the people over there, and definitely sending prayers and good vibes.
Still in Alberta, Grand Chief of the Treaty 8 First Nations of Alberta says that the 23 First Nations there are no longer part of the Assembly of First Nations. Here's Chris Stewart to explain.
Treaty 8 was entered into by our forefathers as a sovereign people of Treaty 8. There was no AFN back then. It's Treaty 8 people for a territory where these promises and the benefits from that territory was going to come with the treaty makers as well. With the Imperial Crown, we know our forefathers, what they knew what they entered into.
Treaty 8 First Nations of Alberta Grand Chief Arthur Noski says he has cut ties with the AFN. He says the 23 nations in Alberta who signed Treaty 8 in 1899 want to negotiate on a nation-to-nation basis instead of with the Assembly of First Nations.
The treaties have been neglected to a point where it's only administrative stuff, and that these monies or program dollars are basically, I believe, negotiated by AFN in Canada. By the time it gets to the nations, then it's not a treaty-based funding as promised under treaty. Examples, I guess, would be education and healthcare.
Chief Noski says, as sovereign nations, they have a better ability to properly distribute federal and provincial funds. APTN asked Indigenous Services to comment on Treaty 8 leaving the AFN, but they did not reply to us before airtime.
When AFN basically negotiates with them or talks about numbers, then a lump sum is sent to Alberta, and now the nations are asked to, make the best decision as to how that money is split. And to us, that is not a treaty-based process, and that is the reason why, we pulled out. Basically, we tried working with them. I guess I'll say that as well, but to date, it has not come to a place where the autonomy of the sovereign nations that entered into treaty is not being respected and honored.
Chief Noski says the AFN has asked for a band council resolution from the Treaty 8 communities. He says many have been sent in, but as far as he is concerned, the organization is no longer a part of the AFN. Alberta currently does not have an AFN regional chief. Marlene Poitras was removed in December. Her mandate had expired at the end of June 2021. The Assembly of First Nations declined an interview about the story. In a statement to APTN, they write in full, "In the absence of an Assembly of First Nations Alberta Regional Chief, Alberta Region, including Treaty 8, is currently represented through the many Chiefs Committees and Technical Committees that inform the work of the National Office to advance First Nation priorities as mandated by Chiefs in Assembly." Grand Chief Noski says he meets with Treaty 8 leaders from Saskatchewan, Northwest Territories, and British Columbia on a monthly basis. Chris Stewart, APTN National News, Edmonton.
To Manitoba now, the Southern Chiefs organization has signed a memorandum of understanding with Winnipeg's largest school division to ensure that First Nation students have access to the supports and resources they need to succeed. Our Daryl Stranger has more.
Students need to be given every possible opportunity and chance to do well. And they have to feel safe, and they have to feel welcome, and they have to feel that that's a place for them.
An MOU signed by the Winnipeg School Division and Southern Chiefs organization will see a new Jordan's Principal Coordinator work with First Nations students. Passed in 2007 by the House of Commons, Jordan's principal states First Nation children would get the products, services, and supports they need when they need them.
It's important that we all take a hand in this. I mean, this is one Jordan's Principal Coordinator, but change comes through the collective actions of teachers, resource workers, principals, like gym teachers, mentors, school students, who all have to work together to create a positive atmosphere and to make people safe. And I think that's what we need to be focused on as it relates to school, and it's a collective effort.
One way the coordinator will help is by showing students, staff, and parents what supports are available in the first place and enhancing what is already there.
We do tutoring services already. We have teaching assistants supporting kids. We do have clinical supports. We have the mental health services. We have cultural supports already. We have those things in place. But how do we enhance and make them even more robust in order to achieve the goals of just being successful, wanting to come to school every day, feeling welcomed, those types of approaches.
Riel added only about 28% of students identify as status, but he projects 40% are unidentified for a number of reasons, something this new coordinator will assist with so more students can access supports.
Because you can't get support through Jordan's Principal if you don't have that status identification. So our first thing what we're going to do before the end of the school year is set up an identification drive, because we know there's multiple families from our experience already working in Jordan's Principal that they don't have that, or it takes 9 months, or it's really difficult to get that identification through the federal government. There's lots of hoops you got to jump through.
As of 2020, Manitoba's four-year high school graduation rate is 82.6%. For non-Indigenous students, the rate is 90.8%, and for Indigenous students, it drops to 50.9%. Daniels believes this position can assist in the learning and in the overall health of students.
It's important for our students to feel valued because it actually shapes their self-worth. It shapes the way they see themselves in the world. And the way they're treated is impactful. And so we have to make sure that they're treated very well, that they're welcomed in these institutions, and that they're given every opportunity to do well and to live healthy, vibrant lives.
Daryl Stranger, APTN National News, Winnipeg.
We need to take another break, but there's more news still ahead, including a chat with some of the authors of a first-person book about Indigenous women and street gangs. Stay with us. Welcome back. It's time now for our photo of the day. This submission comes from Melanie Massicott. It was taken around Pavanatoka, I think is how you say it, Nunavut. I can't tell if this is a sunset or if it's a sunrise, but it's beautiful out there. Thanks for this great photo, Melanie. Email your photos to share@aptn.ca and you might be featured as our next photo of the day. Here's our forecast for tomorrow's weather. Off to the east coast, we've got 0 and some cloud for St. John. Sunshine, -2 in Charlottetown. Kuujjuaq, -14 and flurries. Sunshine, and -19 for Nikshawak. Val-d'Or, -6 and snow. Cass Bay, sunshine, -1. 4 and sunshine for Peterborough, -4 and in North Bay. -8 and snow for Kapuskasing and Timmins. -12 with a mix of sun and cloud. It's a lookout. -13 in God's Lake and Norway House. Mostly sunny there. Snow expected for Winnipeg, -16. Dauphin and Brandon both -10 with snow there. Same with you over in Yorkton and Regina and Swift Current. -11 in Buffalo Narrows, -21 in snow for Stony Rapids. -20 in Fort Chip with some snow expected, -10 in snow in Peace River. Snow continues down south in Alberta, -9 for Red Deer and Edmonton. Sunshine for Kamloops, 3 degrees expected there. 6 and showers for Campbell River. -9 in snow for Fort Nelson. 0 and snow for Smithers. -3 in snow for Dawson City. -20 with mix of sun and cloud in Rock River. Wauatee, sunshine, -23. Fort Simpson, -16 and sunny. Colville Lake, -21 and sunny skies. Tuktoyaktuk, -24, sunny there too. New Yacht, snow, -26, sunshine, and -26 for Chesterfield. Arctic Bay, sunny, -28. Tallyoak, mix of sun and cloud, -27. A bit has been written about Indigenous women and street gangs, maybe not as much as men in street gangs, but certainly not as much as women writing this themselves, women who've lived this life. 6 women used their words and photos to do just that in a new book called Indigenous Women and Street Gangs, A Survivance Narrative. Chantel is one of them. In the book, she writes about how she wants to be a better parent to her kids and grandkids and use her experiences, both negative and positive, as teaching tools. That was in 2016 when she wrote that. Here's what she had to say today.
I didn't stay on the path that you just read about. I strayed from that path and I ended up back and I ended up back in the street criminal gang lifestyle, and I ended up back in prison, right? So like Bobby said, there's a lot of growth in the 5 years that we started this. There's a lot of trauma, there's a lot of truths that need to be told, but yeah, I didn't, when that was written, I didn't stay on that good path. I didn't continue walking that good life I was living. I went back to the lifestyle. So I had to, from what you read to now, I had to reconnect with my kids. I had to reconnect with my grandkids. You know, it's a harsh reality when you're living that life that could happen, right?
You really should watch that whole episode on APTN News YouTube channel. We are all out of time for your Wednesday night news. Thanks so much for joining us. I'm Melissa Ridgen. Dennis Ward will be back in this seat tomorrow. Have a great night.